Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine critical role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 33. Are we at 33?
We're at 33.
Part 2. Part 2. I did not prep for this at all. So, the icebreaker that I literally just prepped in the last 2 minutes is: what is your perfect sandwich? What do you put when you want your perfect sandwich?
Oh, it's a good question. Mostly because, overall, I'm pretty tired of sandwiches. So
Hmm.
I would have sandwiches every day in my lunch, all through, like, school and everything. And it just has gotten to the point where I'm not a huge fan of sandwiches anymore.
Hmm.
But I do like a good grilled cheese sandwich. And
Hmm.
I especially like it when I kind of mess with the grilled cheese a bit and experiment, add some things in. Like I
Yeah.
once had this really good grilled cheese that was with brie cheese, and I put jam on it and it was really good.
Ooh, yeah.
Then there was one time I made a grilled cheese that was kind of like a Hawaiian pizza, and I put ham and pineapple on it, and that was good.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I did a lot of grilled cheese back in the day, and I definitely experimented with different kinds of cheese. But my favorite sandwich, the one that always puts me in a good mood, like whenever I feel like I need something to hit those dopamine receptors in my brain, is actually tomato sandwiches. Tomato,
Oh,
like a really good ripe tomato with mayonnaise and salt. And if you put a little bit of basil on top of it, then that is ideal. Like, I know it's so plain, but a good tomato sandwich makes my day better.
nice.
And I almost like, I really love cucumber sandwiches too, when you put like cream cheese and dill with the
Mm,
cucumbers on them. But a good tomato sandwich you can't beat, especially if it's like really good ripe tomatoes. Like, I'm just a big
nice.
tomato fan in general.
That's fair.
But speaking of grilled cheese, I used to put like pesto inside grilled cheese.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, especially if we want to do like a mozzarella or like one of the white cheeses instead of the standard cheddar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, put basil on anything and I'm pretty happy. Oh, well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, subscribe below. And ready? All right, let's dive in. So as we open this second half, Vox Machina has take it away, Petal.
Yeah, so we come back from the break after the the kiss and the confession of love.
Mm.
Keyleth casts Cure Wounds on Vax, not responding to his confession immediately. Vex and Grog follow Ripley out of the room. Percy begins to pick up Vex's arrows. Percy then takes the arrows and begins to hit Vax on the chest with the arrows and scolds him for rushing into the combat beforehand, and then goes to Cassandra's side, kind of breaking the moment between Keyleth and Vax. Uh, Cassandra embraces Percy. Percy apologizes for leaving her. Cassandra appears happy, but there is a coldness to her face, and it is clear that she has been through a lot. She tells Percy that they have both survived quite a bit. She then tells him that he shouldn't be here because the Briarwoods are using her to get to him. Percy asks if she is hurt, and Cassandra says that she is fine. Percy assures her that Vox Machina is going to stop the Briarwoods tonight. Cassandra voices doubt, as there have been failed attempts before, but she says she will get ready and help. Percy urges her to stay out of harm's way, but Cassandra insists on joining the fight, as she has been fighting the Briarwoods for 3 years now, saying that she doesn't have to listen to him. Cassandra leaves the room to go get ready. Then we cut to Ripley running out of the castle into the daylight. Trinket is pursuing, followed by Grog, Scanlan, and Vex, but she escapes out of sight, so they decide to return to the others. Percy says that they've got bigger issues than Ripley right now. The party then begins to loot Anders and finds gold and boots of levitation. The party then burns him in the fireplace so that there's no chance of him coming back. Vax unlocks a drawer, untrapping it in the process, and finds a collection of letters. Vax gives them to Percy, who reads them and finds lots of information about Whitestone, such as plans to remove magical defenses in Iman during the political meeting, plans for using the Whitestone to build the ziggurat. There are also letters warning of Seeker Assooned spies, and plans to obscure political dealings in Whitestone, as well as covering the Briarwoods Trail in Wildmount. Most concerning of all is a letter that reads, "The undying king shall return, we are his blood." None of these letters are signed, save for one discussing the construction of a bridge, and that one is signed by Lord Risco Daxio from the court of Tal'Dorei, who is the man who built Greyskull Keep. Scanlan scries to the keep to make sure it's safe, but doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. At this point, Cassandra returns, dressed in her mother's armor. Grog asks to see her neck and then finds her clear of puncture wounds. Percy tells her to lead the way. Vex asks about traps. Cassandra says that she's not aware of any, but that there likely are some out there. Scanlan asks Percy for one of Ripley's guns. Percy gives him one. Scanlan tries firing it without a bullet loaded. Percy then gives him 4 bullets and tells him to drop it if anything goes wrong. Vex then takes the gun from Scanlan. Vax asks what the Vax approaches Cassandra and asks her what Anders wanted her to say when he had a knife to her throat. Cassandra says he wanted her to yell for help. Vax asks how she got here in this position, and Cassandra explains that she survived the arrows that Percy had presumed killed her, and she was brought back to Whitestone by Father Raynal at the Temple of Pelor. At that time, people spoke out against the Briarwoods, and Cassandra began to build the rebellion. It took about 2 years before their first move, but the Briarwoods knew it was coming. Lord Briarwood slaughtered most of the men, but recognized Cassandra's face. He did not harm her. She was taken to the castle and was treated as a guest against her will and used for leverage. Lord Briarwood tried to control her, but she hated him too strongly to fall for it. She has since been working to undermine him, reading strategy books in the library for 3 years. She found allies in the castle and contacted Keeper Yennin and Archibald to build the rebellion from the outside. Percy asks her if he can check and see if she is being controlled by the Briarwoods before they go further. Cassandra asks if he trusts her. Percy says he does, and that's the problem. Cassandra agrees. The party decides to use the helmet to disrupt any potential control. She attunes to the helmet and says she doesn't feel any different. Percy says he has a potion of greater restoration to break any spell. She drinks it. Percy then reveals that it is a healing potion, and he was just testing to see if she would drink it willingly. Cassandra then leads the party into the cellar. The party asks if the Briarwoods are down here, to which Cassandra responds that the Briarwoods spend most of their time down here beneath the castle. They often come down with guards. She is not allowed down here, but has snuck down multiple times and has gotten as far as the distillery. Vex asks what Lady Briarwood is, and Cassandra says that she is a wicked beast of a creature, but she is not a vampire like her husband. She does have a strong grasp of necromancy. The Briarwoods often speak of the Whispered One. Vex proposes that the Whispered One may be the demon in Percy. Scanlan asks if Vedmire has come around the castle. Cassandra says only a few times. Scanlan suggests Grog face him if he is lurking around, as he is also a Goliath. Scanlan begins to flirt with Cassandra, which Percy shuts down. Scanlan then casts Seeming on the party to make everyone look like either Percy or Cassandra, depending on their gender, and Vex casts Pass Without a Trace. At this point, Keyleth pulls Vax aside, both of them looking like Cassandra and Percy respectively, and tells him to be careful. They then enter the Durolo mausoleum. All the tomb doors are open. They find a hole burrowed into the far wall. Among the dirt and stuff, they find some dark green glass and broken white stone. The party cannot determine what the glass is. Vex and Grog begin to look for tracks. Grog finds a cluster of recent footprints from 7 people with a very impressive nat 20. The party then checks the empty tombs and finds some ghostly mist. They roll initiative. First up is Percy. He yells, "Look out," and backs away. He shoots the one he can see with the pepper box. The bullet passes through with no effect. He then tries to shoot with fire and hits with a nat 20. Percy yells to the others that only magic can hurt the ghostly figures and hits them again with ice damage. One ghost then goes to Keyleth. She makes a charisma throw and fails. The wraith enters her form and possesses her. Vax and Grog also end up possessed by the wraiths. The surprise round end and Percy's turn is up again. He turns to Cassandra and asks what they do. Cassandra says she is not a holy woman. Percy then backs into the tomb and sends 2 magical shots towards Vax, trying to shoot him in the face. The gun jams. The possessed Vax then moves to attack Percy with his daggers and hits. Vax makes a religion check. The emblem on Sarenrae on his glove flares, and Pike can be heard saying, "Vax, it's okay," as the ghost is forced out of his form. Next, Scanlan uses a scroll from Gilmore to cast Spirit Guardians. Scanlan then uses the harmonica to inspire Vex. The possessed Keyleth makes a staff attack against Scanlan. He uses cutting words to distract her. Keyleth takes damage from Spirit Guardians. The possessed Grog misses an attack against Vex with his hammer. Vex gets Trinket to cannonball through Grog, Keyleth, and Scanlan. Keyleth gets an opportunity attack on Trinket. Trinket hits everyone, including Scanlan, who is the only one not possessed in that row of people. Vex then shoots an arrow at Grog, but it misses. Grog takes damage from the Spirit Guardians. He focuses his attention on Vex and hits her with the hammer, hitting once and missing once. Percy then tries to fix his gun and succeeds. He asks if Vax is better. Vax nods. Percy moves in view of the wraith. The wraith that just left Vax moved towards Percy and possesses him as he rolls a nat 1 on his charisma save. Vax clicks his boots and sticks a dagger in Percy's gut and attempts to punch him in the face with the gloved hand with the symbol of Sarenrae, but misses. Vax runs further away. Scanlan moves between Grog and Keyleth and casts Thunderwave, hitting Trinket as well. Scanlan inspires Vax. Keyleth takes damage from the Spirit Guardians. She attacks Vax with her staff as he is running by, missing him. Trinket tries to distract Grog by tripping him so Vex can run past, but Grog is too strong. Vex rolls past to try to avoid getting hit. Grog hits her anyway with his hammer. Vex uses her bonus action to yell for help. Cassandra rushes up with a short sword to attack Grog and misses. She tries again with her dagger and misses again. She manages to hit with her short sword on her 3rd attack and misses again with her dagger. Grog takes damage from Spirit Guardians and the wraith within him is disintegrated. He stops himself just before hitting Cassandra as it leaves him. He then attacks Keyleth with his hammer, but she is too fast for him to hit. Percy fires the gun on Vax 3 times. Vax takes half damage on the first one with uncanny dodge, but they all hit. Vax attacks Keyleth with 3 dagger attacks, getting sneak attack. He slides around Grog towards Scanlan. Scanlan blasts Keyleth and Percy with lightning. Both of them save and take half damage. He then casts Healing Word on Vax. Keyleth then takes damage from Spirit Guardians and falls unconscious. The wraith is pushed from her body and is looking ragged, but is still alive. Keyleth fails a death save. Vex shoots the wraith that just left Keyleth with her blazing bowstring and hits, dispersing it completely and taking it out. With her 2nd attack, she shoots Percy, hitting him. Cassandra moves into view of Percy, but does not get close enough to take an attack. The sight of versions of herself and Percy getting possessed and attacking each other are overwhelming because remember, at this point in time, they all look like Percy and Cassandra still. Grog hits Percy with 2 hammer attacks. The party realizes that only the radiant damage of Spirit Guardians seems to be working against the Wraiths when they are inside people, and otherwise it is just people taking these attacks. Grog crits and takes Percy out, and the Wraith leaves his body. The Wraith does not get its possession back on its turn. Percy succeeds a death save. The Wraith attacks Percy, and then Percy fails 2 death saves. Vax runs up next to Cassandra and attacks the Wraith with his 3 daggers. All 3 hit. He runs in front of Percy. Scanlan vaults over Keyleth's body using her butt cheek as support, uses Healing Word on Percy for 9 hit points. Scanlan mocks the Wraith, saying it has no substance and is a nobody, saying it was nothing in life and nothing in death, causing the Wraith to cry and die as it takes on the face of a dead Derolo. Vax goes to Keyleth and stabilizes her with a medicine check. Scanlan sings a song of rest to give everyone an extra d8 of healing during the short rest that they take. Keyleth comes to as Scanlan sings. Scanlan asks Percy if he can loot the bodies in the mausoleum. Percy gives a strong no, as it is his family's crypt. And then as the episode ends, Cassandra urges them to keep going as soon as possible before they are discovered, and the party begins to move into the excavation tunnel, going deeper. And that is the end of the episode.
All right. Well, do you have any initial thoughts? I do have a question about D&D mechanics. Do we know if Lady Briarwood presumably made these wraiths?
I think that's the assumption
Yeah.
with her ability of necromancy. Well, I don't know whether she made the wraiths themselves, but they seem to have, like, with the taking on the face of the dead Derolo, there seems to be some sort of thing going on with the, like, Derolo ancestors that were buried here. Like, my guess is that she did make them using those, especially since it's described as, the the tombs being empty and stuff as they're entering in and investigating, which is like really handy for her to have like a whole mausoleum full of like generations of like dead nobility who want to remember their ancestors and track them, and that's some good fodder there.
Yeah, because I was like thinking about it and I was like, on one level, if we're talking about like the Matt DMing level, this is obviously set up to be some sort of dungeon crawl that like depletes them before they get to the big fight with the Briarwoods, right? But
Yeah,
I think Lady Briarwood is also thinking along those lines of trying to deplete them
absolutely.
before they get to the big Briarwood
And
fight.
the wraiths, they really did was really good at taking people out because it took until nearly the end of the fight before they realized that only radiant damage impacts the wraiths when they're in the bodies of other people. And they were just basically spending all those attacks to like damage each other. So like Vax like stabbing Percy in the gut and
Yeah.
all of these like various things. They're just beating up each other and they don't
Yeah.
even know it.
Well, so there's so many levels. So, there's like the Matt dungeon crawl level, there's the Lady Briarwood dungeon crawl level, and then I was even thinking about how the wraiths could even be like a metaphor for self-sabotage, right?
And then there's the extra layer of like this entire battle, they all look like Percy and Cassandra.
Yeah, that adds the absurdity to it.
But it also is interesting because
Yeah,
like both of these characters carry such like heavy burdens and guilt and all of these
yeah,
things, and they're happy to see each other, but there's obviously like some tension because like Percy left Cassandra, and then
yeah.
there's like this suspicion of like, oh, what if Cassandra is being controlled? And so there's even like a deep symbolic meaning there, even though
Yeah,
it was an action, like a something that was cast just to make
yeah,
things funny. It's
yeah.
like there's deep symbolism there between the conflict between the two of them and their conflicts both with themselves and with each
Mhm.
other.
It's
Like
metaphorical, figurative, literal, like all of the layers here we're working with.
Exactly. I understand why they didn't put that aspect in like the animated series, but
Yeah,
it would have been something that would have been so cool to see visually if they
yeah,
had played into that symbolism. Like I understand it would have been confusing for such like a short series and they
yeah,
had to cut a whole bunch of stuff to
yeah,
make things work, but I'm like that would be something that would be really interesting to see. Like
yeah,
even as fan art, like just to see the like attacking each other and attacking themselves and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I am thinking a lot about the sibling relationships in this second half. Like,
Yeah.
I'm an only child, so I find sibling relationships fascinating because I've never really lived it. Like, I have step siblings, but I never lived with them, so I don't really have sibling type bonds with them. And I've been thinking a lot about the allure of nepotism.
Hmm.
Like just this whole blood is thicker than water kind of we stick with our blood family type of like, Percy really wants to believe Cass, really wants to have that familial bond with her, but there's so many questions about her loyalty in this. And, I think at this point we get the idea that Cass also wants that familial bond as
Hmm.
well, but we don't also have her internal monologue available to us
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, well, what really strikes me is that moment when like Percy was like was like asking if he could test and see whether she was being controlled, and she's like, "Oh, don't you trust me?" And he's like, "I do, that's the problem."
Yeah.
And it's just like both that like acknowledgement of like the weak spot he has in that
Mhm.
when it comes to his family, but also like just being so happy that he's not the only one alive. But then
Yeah.
also, like, I'm sure on her side, there's like hurt that like they're suspicious of her, but she also like understands because of the nature of the situation. And it's so complex. Then also thinking about this jumping to a completely different thing, but also like on the family ties note that you were talking about, I find it really interesting that Cassandra goes and gets her mother's armor
Yeah,
for this mission. Like,
absolutely.
it really is kind of very symbolic of her like stepping in and taking that role her mother held, that like
Yeah.
leadership role.
Because I think that's such a human urge to want to trust our blood family, right? Like
Hmm.
we're literally ingrained from like from birth instantly to want to have these familial bonds and to be able to trust these familial bonds and rely on these people that are of our close family. And it's an interesting look here. And like, we see this a lot in fantasy and media in general.
Hmm.
What happens when those bonds become untrustworthy or they are being shaken by external circumstances and imperfect human decision making. Like Percy had
Oh
to
yeah.
make that life and death decision to either stay with his sister when she got shot by arrows or to save his own ass. And
Hmm.
it's completely valid that he did choose to save his own ass. And is it fair of Cassandra to hold that against him?
And it seems like she's not, like, at least not in this moment. I think right now they kind of have this focus of, like, okay, we need to take down the Briarwoods. That's kind of like a uniting force. But she hasn't
Mhm.
actually, like, aside from some, like, subtle cues that Matt has described, like, she hasn't actually, like, outwardly, like, blamed him or anything
Mhm.
like that. In her, I was very surprised because,
Mhm.
like, in her like words and the way she's interacting, like she's very forgiving for
Mhm.
what happened to her, and I'm sure a lot of that just is like the urgency of like, we need to take out the Briarwoods as soon
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah.
But like, there's definitely some like unaddressed stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think this wraps into this whole self-sabotage metaphor as
Hmm.
well, because there's in-group conflict that is creating sabotage, like literal and figurative sabotage here. And
Yeah.
it's also slowing down their momentum to getting to the Briarwood fight, which is definitely something that Matt put into the mechanics of this dungeon crawl. But I think that that's something that we can all relate to as well, is like having our own personal issues get in the way of our goals.
Absolutely. That's a very human thing.
Yeah. There's just so many layers. Like on the surface, it's just a fight second half.
Hmm.
Like we just have these battle against these wraiths. They get through it, yada yada yada. We have the reunification of Percy and Cass, but on the other levels, there's so much that's not being said and not being shown and not being explicitly pointed out in these dynamics.
Yeah, that's one of the really interesting things about like improv as a medium and like D&D or other tabletop role-playing games as like a medium is that there's so many things that in the moment are just like a quick spur of the moment decision that just like happen because you don't have time to like think it through. And then when you look at them later, like the implications and the meaning of those choices, like some of those times, like depending on the choice and depending on like your skill as a D&D player, like sometimes those choices like are very deliberate, but I think
Mhm.
it's also really interesting when you can like have these like random events and then when you look back on them, they're like steeped in meaning that end up coming into play like when you take into account all the surrounding things and finding that like unintended meaning.
Because
And I find it fascinating.
that's a deeply human urge too, is to find
Yeah.
pattern. You know what I mean? Like we create the meaning. Like I've never been a fan of there's a reason for everything, that phrase, because
Hmm.
we ascribe the reason. We are the ones
Yeah.
who create the meaning. We are the ones who ascribe the reason that we end up taking away from a certain situation because our brains just
Hmm.
like finding patterns. Like that's what our
Exactly.
brains like doing. And so I think that that's a deeply human urge to look back at these seemingly insignificant decisions that we've made somewhere, somehow along the way. Like you decide to go out for coffee with that one connection that you have, and that changes your entire life moving forward.
Hmm.
Or you decide to turn down one street just driving randomly around one day, and that changes your whole life moving forward. Like it's those minuscule, tiny decisions that end up making such a difference later on.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that it would be reflected in media like D&D and improv and RPG.
Absolutely.
And I'm also thinking about the sibling adjacent relationship that's developing between Percy and Vax too in
Yeah.
the episode. Because we also haven't seen that develop much up until this point.
Uh-huh.
Until the whole like Percy, criticizing Vax for doing the same Jenga running in with no backup
Yeah.
deal. And
Yeah.
that's also fascinating. It's like I think there is Percy tapping into his sibling role now that Cassandra's back into the picture. Is that what influenced him to then extend it to Vax?
Yeah, well, I think it also just like gives him hope because before
Mhm.
this kind of point, it's been like, there's nothing else for me. I don't care if like this quest for revenge like kills me. I'll do what it takes.
Mm.
But I think having Cassandra and especially having Cassandra tangibly there is like starting to make him think about the future. Like this is becoming less and less of like just a suicide mission. And then
Mhm.
in doing so, he's probably realizing, especially if as they've chosen to like stick by him through an incredibly dangerous, potentially like life-ending quest, he's probably recognizing in this moment just how much the party that he's been traveling with mean to him.
Yeah, because it was definitely Vex the first time around that scolded him for running into the Briarwood fight back.
Yeah.
And now it's Percy scolding him for running
Mm-hmm.
the fight. And that's definitely a new facet of their relationship to go to that point.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
find that fascinating is that we're both seeing the development and exploration of blood family ties as well as found family ties in this group in the second half and how they compare and contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like playing into like the beloved trope of found family too. because that very often happens with D&D parties, and this is no exception.
Yeah.
Like, it's bound to happen when you spend so much time traveling together and risking your lives with each other. They're that kind of bond that is built
Yeah.
is a very strong bond.
And with the seeming spell, the found family trope has become literally visible at this point.
Yeah,
Like it is a, I don't know if I want to call it a tangible thing now, but it's at least a visible thing now.
exactly.
So where do you think this dynamic is leading them?
Well, I think it's interesting because um like I often think about how close these D&D parties become. I'm thinking big picture now, but
Hmm.
then like oftentimes like at the end they still like split up and go their separate ways, but obviously in this moment it's still so like meaningful. I think in a lot of ways, I mean, you see it time and time again, like just like the power of friendship. I think
Hmm.
these bonds make them stronger and give them more
Hmm.
reason to fight.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like we were talking about in the last episode, this is the true beginning of Vox Machina as a group. Because
Hmm.
previously, Percy was a little distant from the group. He kept to himself.
Yeah.
He would disappear into his workshop, so on and so forth. And they kind of always acted individually, but as a group leading up to this point. And I think now they're working more towards group decision making. Like even Vax,
Yeah.
I think is it the last time Vax does his Jenga no backup? Maybe. I don't know. I can't
I
remember.
can't remember. It's kind of the rogue's job to do that.
Yeah, yeah. But it's I think it's the last moment where they he makes it so obvious that he's going on his own and they're
Yeah.
I we I may be proven wrong later on.
There's a lot of Critical Role to
Yeah, we
come
have a
where
lot of
we'll find
episodes
out.
to get to. But what personal experiences are coming to mind for us as we go over this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different facets in what we've already talked about, like family versus found family, like self-sabotage, all these different things. I think uh what I was really thinking about is um like it's interesting that like just like the trope of like found family as a whole, because a lot of the time found family comes into play when you don't have a strong bond like with
Mhm.
your blood
Yeah,
family for whatever
yeah.
reason. And it just like makes me think like part of the reason why Percy is building such a strong bond with Vox Machina is because like it's the whole reason why he started traveling with them in the first place is because he like his whole family aside from Cassandra, but that's a recent discovery, has been like
Yeah.
destroyed. And it just has like got me thinking of the more and more like I used to be like really close to my family, and I still do really like spending time with most members of my family. But it's interesting how things changed, like with the realization that I'm queer,
Mm,
because I do have some supportive family. I'm not out to like the majority of my family,
mm,
and I do have like some family members who are like really like supportive of like queer rights and all this sort of stuff. But I also have a good number of family members who are either like very on the fence about it or who are like very against it and
mm,
just like I mean, I can't say for sure how they'd react because like I haven't fully come out to any of my family members, really, aside from my siblings. But it's just interesting how that kind of what that does to that bond that I had with them before.
yeah.
Like, I still really enjoy spending time with most of them,
Mm,
but it's like, I don't know, it's hard to feel that belonging when I don't know if
mm,
they'd really accept all of me
mm. Yeah.
or whether that would be something to like prey gets better once I'm no longer there in the room.
Mhm. I mean, is that influencing you to put more emphasis on found family nowadays?
I think it has. Like, I'm not sure I really have like a set found family, but it
Mhm.
definitely is like driving me out more to like seek more like close bonds like with my friends, and has
Mhm.
definitely placed like a desire for found
Mhm.
family.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's like I haven't gotten there yet and finding people that I would consider like my found family, but it's definitely placed like a hunger for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always been a fan more so of found family than blood family. And I think that's just because I am an only child, and so I only have so much blood family. And the blood
Mm-hmm.
family I do have kind of looks at me as a black sheep anyway, like just for a variety of reasons. And I've always been much more of a found family kind of person. But I can admit in the past to being hurt by being excluded by family members in
Mm-hmm.
certain situations. And it's why I choose to emphasize found family tropes and like the things that I write as well, because it is
Mm-hmm.
really who you choose to surround yourself that makes the biggest difference. Like I see
Exactly.
that reflected back to me in media time and time and time and time again. Like one of my favorite shows, like I've mentioned on here before, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the reason why she's such an like she breaks the cycle of slayers is because she has her found family around her
Mm-hmm.
to join her in the fight. And that's what makes her different than all of the slayers that came before her. And I just love that idea is like you don't have to just be stuck with the people that you're directly related to. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of specific personal experiences, like I can definitely relate to the whole self-sabotage thing. Like, man, there's times where I feel like I'm fighting myself literally when it comes to
Oh yeah.
things. Like, I'm honestly right in the middle of trying to detox from getting addicted to my nicotine vape pen. Just to get a little more
Mm-hmm.
self-sabotage superficial level. And like the other day I literally had to talk myself out of buying a pack of clove cigarettes. And I was like, Claire, you are defeating the purpose. And like I went down a whole Google rabbit hole about like other smokable herbs. I was like, are they more healthy than like tobacco? And I found this whole like study on like what it does to all the lungs, like all of the different herbal cigarettes. And I was like, damn it, I can't even smoke like rose petals.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely struggling with some self-sabotage in that regard.
Yeah, I think self-sabotage is just like a pretty universal thing. Like I almost talked about that for my thing, but like yeah, it's difficult sometimes when there's something that like you really want to do, but there's also a part of you that really doesn't want to do it.
Mhm.
And figuring out which side wins
Yeah, yeah.
is
Like
always
the
interesting.
big corporate tobacco companies are my Briarwoods at the moment.
That's a great metaphor.
They are the ones that keep putting the products in my face. They are the wraiths that are coming to possess me.
I think it's like the individual like cigarettes are the wraiths because they're
Yeah,
like physically going in your body
yeah,
like that. If we
yeah,
want to like get really detailed with this metaphor.
yeah. I approve of this metaphor. I will take credit for that. But yes, the I have my own Briarwoods. Let me find them. Well,
Uh,
what are we gonna do?
yeah, well, on my topic, I mean, it's kind of hard right now because I still technically live with my parents, just
Mm,
with the way that like the whole rental market is right now. It just
dude,
makes
not
the
worth it.
most financial sense.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like hard to like strike out and find a found family when I'm still literally living at home with my parents.
I get it.
And it's, but I think it's just to like, I mean, just because I'm with my parents doesn't mean that like I can't find that
Yeah.
and start building that. So I think it's just a reminder to myself Like, even though I know, I think a lot of times I really hold on to like, oh, like I want to do this, but I'll do it like after I move out.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's probably going to be like at least a couple more years before I move out, just given the reality of like the rental market
Capitalism.
and capitalism and the hellscape we're living in regards to that. I think I don't want to like reach a point where I like finally move out, but I feel like I've wasted my time just like
Mhm.
waiting. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just the constant reminder, and I constantly need to remind myself this. There's so many things. I'm just like, oh, like I'll just like wait until I'm telling. But I'm sure that like for some of these things that I'm like nervous about, or for whatever reason holding myself back from, like I'm sure that if I don't start working through it now, when I do actually move out, there will be other excuses and other
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Like I
That's
think
self-sabotage
with
for you.
with like found family, like there's like a fear of like vulnerability
Oh,
and
sure.
all of these different things. And so it's I could go into so many details about all the different things that I want to do once I like move out of my parents' place. But I think, as I said, I just need to really start working on finding ways, even if I can't do them all the way while I'm here,
Mhm.
finding ways to start some of these things so that when I do move out of my parents' place, I can embrace them more fully instead of just finding myself facing a whole wall of excuses because I haven't yet done the work to like work through the mental blocks and the self-sabotage. I'm looping back around to your thing now too. The way that I am self-sabotaging myself in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. May we continue rolling high on our wisdom saves against the
Yeah.
wraiths in our lives.
Yeah.
It was a real struggle the other night. I've started watching Dimension 20, and one of the characters on Dimensions 20 smokes cloves, and that's what like got it in my.
Ah, yes.
And I was like, man, I really need to resist this. I really need to resist this. I was like, oh man, like I have another friend who's quitting along with me. And so I texted her and I was like, please tell me not to go buy these. So far I have rolled high on my wisdom saves, but
That's
we
great.
shall see how it continues. But yeah, and I think, that's a very easy external self-sabotage example that I can think of
Hmm.
now. But I think it's also important to continue to be curious and search for the more subtle versions of self-sabotage in my life and how it shows
Yeah.
and all of that. And um not being afraid to question myself because I'm not afraid to question other people, but not being afraid to question myself, I think, is also an important practice to
Hmm.
cultivate.
Yeah.
And being like,
Yeah, for sure.
is that really how the situation is, or am I doing something here that's
It's easy to point a finger at other people and
yeah,
think of yourself as blameless.
yeah,
Like I find myself doing it too.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
All I want is a vape right now, and I need to like chain myself to my apartment so I don't go. Well, anything else you want to add before we start wrapping up?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
This is powerful stuff that we're talking about. Per usual, this feels like a therapy session, and I need to
Yeah.
go consider my life. But, audience, we definitely encourage you to reach out and share your own thoughts and feelings and experiences with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives. Special thanks to Petall for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
So next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 34, Part 1, and joining me will be Atlas. So I'm excited for that. As always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests, so if you're interested, hit me up. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR, and I promise I'll update it one of these days. One of these days. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.